Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 MLB video. Proudly sporting the light blue Toronto Blue Jays jersey. And we are going to, excuse me as I burp, we're going to look at the top 10 MLB draft steals of all time. Now, no, I'm not going to do draft busts because, in essence, baseball draft is not as big as the football, basketball, or hockey drafts in a thing. But so yeah, there's been a lot of number one draft picks like Matt Bush, who was a massive bust. He went to prison. Anyway, we're gonna be looking at draft steals and all that. Now, baseball, unlike hockey, football, and basketball, go past 7 rounds. Basketball only has 2 rounds of drafting. Hockey has seven, and football has seven. But anyway, there's a lot of things going on here. All right, so here we go. Number 10 is Wade Boggs, 7th round, 1976, Bo Sox. Wade Boggs, everyone knows about his third base prowess with the Boston Red Sox. Is he the greatest third baseman in Boston Red Sox history? I think so. Name one other guy. And you can't say Jimmy Fox because he was the first baseman. It could have been Jeff Bagwell if Boston allowed him to play third base and not trade him to Houston. But anyway, Wade Boggs was this amazing player and all that. And, he had a Hall of Fame career, 18 straight seasons batting 300 or better and putting up over 3,000 hits. He was big for Boston in the 80s and early 90s, and then they let him go to none other than the hated New York Yankees. Boggs did get an ovation when he came to Boston for the first time as a member of an opposing team, the Yankees. He was okay for the Yankees. He did win a World Series ring in 1996 with them, and I think Red Sox fans really wanted him to have a ring. Boggs would play a couple years for Tampa, his hometown team, and got his 3,000th hit as a member of the Tampa Bay Rays, and unnecessarily kissed home plate. Why would you do that? But anyway, Wade Boggs is still a great player. Number 9 is Jeff Kent, 20th round, 1989, by my beloved Toronto Blue Jays. And congratulations to Jeff Kent for making the Hall of Fame, class of 2026. This wasn't because he's getting to the Hall of Fame this year. It was because of the fact that he was pretty good. 20th round. That's amazing and all that. As I said, baseball has more rounds of drafting than football, basketball, and hockey put together. Nevertheless, the Blue Jays were looking forward to making him second base. And Ken went up through the minor league uh, ladder pretty well. He even played for the Blue Jays in 1992. But the Blue Jays needed to send somebody to the Mets for the one of David Cohn. The Mets said David Cohn was available, so they traded him to the Blue Jays for Jeff Kent and somebody else I can't remember. But yeah, Jeff Kent was the big piece to the Mets. It worked out. Jeff Kent became a reasonable second baseman for the Mets, and the Blue Jays got David Cohn for a World Series title run. Anyway, Kent would go on from the Mets to the Giants, win the 2000 NL MVP, beating his good buddy and teammate Barry Bonds, but then Bonds won the next four by steroids. He is the all-time leader in home runs among second basemen. Yeah, he had the power numbers. I admit it. I really do. Number 8 is Don Mattingly. 19th round, 1979, New York Yankees. Mattingly, I told you to shave those sideburns. Get off, you're off the team for good. Fine. I like him better than Steinbrenner. Home run at the bat is my favorite episode. But anyway, Don Mattingly was a fantastic player and all that. A good hitter in the 1980s and all that. One time he even played second base. Well, in that famous 1983 Pine Tar game, he was put in second base as a rookie. But anyhow, Mattingly would become the first baseman that the Yankees really needed. Well, they had Chris Chambliss, but at the one time. But anyway, Mattingly was big, 19th round, and he became a star for the Yankees in the 1980s. Once hitting 7 Grand Slams. Was it 7 or 6 Grand Slams in one season? I think it was 6. But then, funny as it sounds, Mattingly never hit a Grand Slam before or after 1987. But anyway, yeah, he was an MVP in 1985, well deserved and all that. Could have been a Blue Jay? Nah, I think the vote would have been split between Bell, Barfield, and Mosby. But yeah, Mattingly deserved it. 240 hits that year, I think. But yeah, several Gold Gloves, and he was Yankee icon. I can't remember. Yeah, he did not play for another team other than the Yankees. He could have been part of the '96 Yankees in their thing, but he retired after the '95 season because he was running out of time and he was injured all the time. Worst part was that, yeah, '96 they won the World Series. Poor guy, never got a ring. Miley became a manager and a bench coach. He, like the assistant manager, if you will. He was the bench coach for the Blue Jays, but now he's gone to, I think, the Phillies. Can't remember, but yeah. I mean, dude deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, number 7 is Jacob DeGrom, ninth round, 2010 Mets. The Mets needed a good, strong pitcher and all that. They just couldn't find anyone. Pedro was a bust. The Mets just had a few good pitchers, but 2006 they faltered in the LCS to the Cardinals. But Jacob DeGrom was big. They call him, was that 4 they called DeGrom, or was that Syndergaard? Oh, that was Syndergaard, sorry. But yeah, Jacob DeGrom, ninth round by the Mets. Multiple Cy Young Awards, impressing the voters so much that his record and ERA, basically, his record didn't really matter. Most people go for like who had the best record, like 20 plus wins instead of a 14 win guy like DeGrom. Anyway, DeGrom was huge and all that. Alongside Matt Harvey, he helped the Mets and Syndergaard. He helped the Mets develop, and by 2015, they were in the World Series against the Kansas City Royals, although they faltered to the Royals. DeGrom was still a pretty good pitcher. He even played for Texas. Did he play for Texas in 2023 when they won the title? I think he did. Don't remember. Number 6 is Dusty Baker as a player, not a manager. 26th round from the Atlanta Braves, 1967. Dusty Baker was a pretty good manager, but let's talk about his playing career. He actually was a decent player, probably part of the Hall of Very Good, if you will. So anyway, Dusty Baker was drafted by Atlanta, didn't really work out for Atlanta, then went to LA and became their star left fielder. He would hit 30 home runs a couple times as a Dodger. He would become a decent player and all that for the Giants and a few other teams. And then, he became a manager. And once he became a manager, he was good. Unfortunately, Dusty Baker, it would, before his World Series ring in 2022, would be basically the Marty Schottenheimer of the MLB. To explain, Marty Schottenheimer had a pretty good regular season record, but come playoff time, he would make dumb decisions. That was Dusty Baker. Although Dusty Baker made one controversial move in 1993, last game for the Giants, that they needed to beat the Dodgers because the Braves won the previous day of a few hours prior. He put Solomon freaking Torres in to pitch the last game against the Dodgers. He got blown up, and the Giants lost the AL West in the what they call the 4-team playoff format in 1993 and moved to, it would have been 8 teams in 1994, but the strike ruined it. But yeah, Dusty Baker was known for making bad managerial decisions, including 2002 in the Giants series, in the World Series. He just couldn't win the big one. Fortunately, though, the Astros gave him the title. Number 5 is Keith Hernandez, 42nd round, 1971 Cardinals. He had long odds. I mean, 42nd round. Like, dude, a team drafts 40 players ahead of you and all that. That's one team. That's a team in itself. But Keith Hernandez, well, he faced the second biggest odds in of the top 10 here. But the fact of the matter is that Hernandez looked good. St. Louis needed to kill a draft pick, so they picked him. Hernandez jumped up through the ranks, and actually by 1979, he was named co-MVP alongside Willie Stargell. So yeah, Hernandez had an MVP type job for St. Louis. Unfortunately, apparently a drug problem would ruin him, and he was traded to the Mets. Yeah, that's right. Trade him to New York. Nevertheless, Hernandez became the captain of the Mets in the 80s and did well. Multiple Gold Gloves and a World Series title in 1986. Becoming a good player and making St. Louis rue the day they got rid of him to the Mets for Neil Allen. Anyway, yeah, Hernandez was a big move, and the Mets picked him up. He later played for Cleveland. Did not know that, but I remember that now. Number 4 is Mark Hurley Burley, 38th round, 98 White Sox. The White Sox didn't really have much of a draft stock, but they picked up this left-hander who was pretty much a late round pick and probably just a throwaway. However, Burley worked up through the system and put up over 200 wins in his major league career, including a no-hitter against the Texas Rangers in 2007. That was good. But he outdid himself a year and a half later in 2009 when he threw El Perfecto, a perfect game, when no Tampa Bay Ray player got on base. None. Zero, nada. And let's not forget Dwayne Wise's catch for the first out of the ninth inning. That was amusing. But yeah, Burley picked up the perfect game and all that. You rarely see that every day. History. Burley did his job for the White Sox, and then he was moved to the Florida Marlins, or the Miami Marlins, if you will. And then the Marlins traded him to the Blue Jays in a massive deal in 2013. Or 2012. That the Blue Jays were salivating because they figured they were going to win the World Series because they got Mark Burley, they got R.A. Dickey, they got a couple of other key players, but it failed. Burley was a serviceable Blue Jay in 2015 when the Blue Jays were on that playoff run. He wasn't the greatest, but he was still decent. And that was great. Really great. Number 3 is John Smoltz, 22nd round, 1985, by the Tigres. You all know John Smoltz was an Atlanta Brave, but did you know he was a Detroit Tiger? This kind of makes my blood boil. Not because the Detroit Tigers are my most hated team, which is the Yankees, obviously, but the fact of the matter is that the Tigers had him, and then a couple years later, he was the player sent to Atlanta for the rights to Doyle Alexander. Doyle Alexander was a former Blue Jay, and the Blue Jays were trying to get him for the stretch drive, but failed. He went to the Tigers for John Smoltz. It was kind of a win-win trade because Smoltz would take a little bit to develop. I mean, he was a prospect. So Atlanta loved him. He became a Cy Young winner. And then when he had troubles with starting, he became a closer. That's right. Smoltz had a 21 season, I think, and a 40 save season, which is amazing. You don't see that every day. That Smoltz goes from starter to closer in a good portion. Although some people do go from closer to starter quite well, like Derek Lowe. But yeah, Smoltz. And then, of course, Doyle Alexander went 9-0 for the Tigers in that 87 stretch drive and fucked the Blue Jays over for the AL East. Well, the Jays didn't win any games in the final week of 1987, so that fucked them up. But yeah, John Smoltz was a great player, part of the 4 aces with the Braves with Maddox, Avery, and Levin. Number 2, Albert Pujols, 13th round, 1999 Cardinals. He was basically being passed over quickly, but the Cardinals needed some help. He was a first baseman, and the Cardinals kind of had to replace Mark McGwire because he was at the end of his rope, if you will. Pujols would blossom. 2001 would mark a massive shift. Everyone knows about Ichiro being named both Rookie of the Year and MVP in the AL for the Mariners. Albert Pujols was tearing it up as the big rookie on the National League side. People thought Pujols was going to do the double, but no, he didn't. It was Bonds because of his stupid steroid inducing 73 home runs. Fuck that. Sorry, personal preference. But anyway, Pujols smashed it. And of course, everyone remembers MVP Baseball 2005, him on the cover, one of the greatest baseball games of all time, not called MLB The Show. I played the shit out of MVP 2005. But anyway, yeah, Albert Pujols was just a smacking home run leader. He was a star for the Cardinals, and they could have him. And then they traded him off to the Angels, and the Angels gave him a massive contract. He was hit or miss for many seasons. He did play 10 years for the Angels, and then went back to St. Louis to finish his career. So at least St. Louis kept him, and I think they are retiring as number 5 soon, probably. But number 1, by a long shot, is Mike Pizza, as in Mike Piazza. 1988 LA Dodgers, round 62. Can you believe it? The 62nd round of a baseball draft. 1988, Mike Piazza. Piazza was only drafted because Tommy Lasorda had a connection with Pizza's father, and Lasorda decided to draft Mike Piazza just as a bit of a thing. He was a catcher and all that. People did not expect him to go well. I mean, 62nd overall round, that's just pure massive. That's like football in the 1960s when they had like a 15-round draft. The 15th round. Basketball used to have a 15-round draft, and hockey used to be like 10 rounds. That's the equivalent of that. But yeah, Pizza in the 62nd round. No, he was not the last draft pick of the draft, but he could have easily been. He went up the ladder. He actually outlived everyone's expectations. Hell, in '93, he was part of the LA Dodgers' plans to ruin the Giants and screw them out of the NL West title, giving them to Atlanta. A lot of people said, why was Atlanta in the NL West in the first place? If anything, the Cubs should have been in the NL West and the Braves in the NL East. Nevertheless, Piazza won Rookie of the Year and started, or was he the second or first guy? Four straight. LA had four straight Rookies of the Year. I know Carroll's, Hollinsworth, and Nomo were there. I think Piazza was number two after Carroll's. But the fact is that he won Rookie of the Year. He impressed everyone. He was a great Dodgers hitter. So much so that the Marlins wanted him in '98. They were dismantling their team, so the Marlins traded some players to the Dodgers to get Mike Piazza. But the Marlins had maybe buyer's remorse or it was set in stone. But a week later, they traded him to the Mets for some key players. And it worked out. Piazza would be the captain, well, the catcher of the Mets. The Mets needed a good catcher. I mean, Gary Carter was decent, and so was I can't remember, but anyhow, Piazza helped the Mets out in the late '90s, early 2000s to become stars, and they got to the World Series in 2000 based on his bat. When he was healthy, he was good for the Mets. A psyche. So that's what you could call a draft steal. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.